On page 5 of the calendar, Representative Marlo Colvin, you have House Resolution 755. Representative Marlo Colvin on House Resolution 755.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have for the House to consider House Resolution 755. This resolution resolves to do a couple things. One, it expresses concern that the Illinois Commerce Commission went beyond its statutory authority in its intent in its recent order approving contracts between Chicago Clean Energy Project, which is more commonly referred to around here as the Leucadia Project, and gas utilities for the purchase of substitute natural gas. And number two, it urges the commissioners to rehear the matter and upon rehearing, reach a decision that reflects statutory directives in the intent of the General Assembly. With regard to this bill, this resolution, whether or not you were an original supporter of the Leucadia legislation, on 5 separate occasions we have passed bills out of this chamber with supermajority pluralities in both the House and the Senate in concert with the governor, which authorized the intent and how the Leucadia sourcing agreements were going to work in this legislation. If you believe, like I believe, that the intent in the will of the people of the state of Illinois is the supreme law, that is, the bills that we pass here in the House and Senate, that we send to the governor, that he signs, where we clearly lay out the intent on how a bill is supposed to be injected into our state law and how it is supposed to reflect the will of the people who voted in supermajority fashions, then you should vote for this resolution, regardless of how you feel about Leucadia. Now, I want to thank again all of my co-sponsors on the original pieces of legislation and the co-sponsors on this resolution who agree with the premise that it's the General Assembly that makes the laws of this land with the authority and by the signature and the authority of the governor of the state of Illinois, which clearly lays out the intent. It is not the role of a regulatory body, an administrative body, or an executive body to redo what we have done here based on the will of the people of the state of Illinois. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions. But we're simply asking here that what the General Assembly did stands as the law of the land with respect to Leucadia. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Chair recognizes Leader Mike Bost.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before I start on to the resolution, I just want to let you know that if you turn it around the other way, it won't break the handle on it. But
I was here when Tim Johnson did that. Remember when the top went flying when he hit it too hard? So I did lose a little piece of the...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this resolution. Let me note that the original legislation enabled the Chicago Clean Energy that we gave the authority to the ICC that in 90 days that they were to perform the limited task that was set before them. Our legislation also anticipated the possibility of a rehearing. We specify a 30-day window to complete the rehearing. We knew that allowing an open-ended rehearing process would draw out the time frame possibly forever. Delays and all of those things, we wanted to make sure that we stopped. Any delays could kill the project. When the ICC does not hold a rehearing, when the ICC does hold a rehearing for this project, I want it to be stated and be very clear that the protocol described in the legislation should be followed. It is not the ICC does not have the authority to supersede we, the General Assembly. The law was very clear. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got to stop the agencies from not implementing that which we put forth in this body. I rise in strong support of the gentleman's resolution, and I would encourage everyone to stand in support of it as well.
Thank you, Leader Bost. Leader David Leach.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yield. Representative, I've supported you all along the way.
Mr. Speaker, excuse me. Can you have it just a little bit?
Marlo, softly. Ladies and gentlemen, we have some discussion going on about a resolution that's very important and numerous members on the floor. Can I ask you to please bring down the noise level on the floor?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
I've supported you all the way along on this path. I guess my concern now is the market and potentially why the ICC acted as it did. As I understand it right now, the Leucadia pricing would be 8 times the present market. Is that natural gas?
That is one, Representative, respectfully, I don't know where you would even get that information. And why someone would say something or give you information that would be so misleading and so false. Quite frankly, this was a discussion and argument that came up in the original vetting of this bill. Chicago Clean Energy and Leucadia, in a very painstakingly way, went through more than 40 iterations with regard to controlling the cost of this gas. We have, through the legislative process, laid that out in our bill, in 2 of our bills. In the last bill that we passed, both out of the House and Senate, laid it out in crystal clear fashion in terms of how those prices would be negotiated. There is no truth to that. I think anybody who's trying to predict such a price spike, and quite frankly, that was an argument that was made right here on the floor, which was also rejected at that time. Representative, I appreciate your support. I realize that you were with us. I would appreciate if you be with us in this regard as well. To the point of the resolution, your yes vote on the Leucadia project, after being properly vetted both in committee, in discussions with the gas companies, in discussion with regulatory bodies, we clearly laid out the role of the ICC. We're not talking about gas prices in this legislation. We're simply saying that the authority of the legislature and its intent within the law and how we laid it out should be adhered to by all regulatory bodies, by all administrative bodies, executive bodies, and of course the General Assembly.
And thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
I respect your position and I understand your position. As just, I guess my only concern is that the formulas that were enacted are so very different in their pricing than it would be in the current marketplace, because as we all know, natural gas is at an all-time historic low these days. So those are the concerns I had, and I was just wondering if that were indeed the basis for the action by the ICC.
No, it was not, quite frankly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
President Roger Reddy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I think the representative has brought to us obviously something that in the underlying nature some people had some questions about. Maybe they didn't vote for the bill, maybe they didn't support the project, maybe they did, but now some issues have come up that they may feel differently about. But I think what we can agree on in this body is what is written in this resolution very, very succinctly, and a point that needs to be made now more than at any other time since I've been in the General Assembly, and that is the General Assembly as a body has certain authority. And when that bill passed, the administrative agencies of this state government do not have the option of picking and choosing what they implement based on the will of the General Assembly. If we were to allow that to happen, the entire checks and balance and balance of power in this state falls apart. What the representative is simply saying is what courts have upheld, and it's very well written in the resolution, that the Illinois appellate and Supreme Courts have consistently held that public policy in Illinois is expressed by the General Assembly. And It's not the province of an administrative agency to inquire into the wishes and propriety of the legislature's act. Their duty is to enact, to follow the direction of the General Assembly. We don't have to look any farther than the Medicaid situation in this state to see this type of ignoring that takes on by administrative agencies of the intent of the General Assembly. Last year, this body passed other Medicaid initiatives, reforms that were supposed to be enacted by votes in the House of 114-4. If we don't stand up for the General Assembly, we may as well go home. I applaud the gentleman for bringing this to the House floor, and I would urge everyone in here to support this, because you're not simply supporting the underlying theory of this, you're supporting the balance of power and the right of the General Assembly for the people of the state of Illinois. I urge an aye vote.
President Colvin to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think my friend Representative Eddy has done an excellent job outlining once again why you should vote yes on this, regardless of how you voted on the original Leucadia legislation. We argued, we debated, we discussed, both in committee here on the House floor, both in the House and Senate, sent this to the governor, where we also debated and discussed and vetted the pluses and the minuses and the merits of this legislation. And in that preponderance, supermajorities in both the House and the Senate passed this legislation. We're beyond that. We're beyond that. What we're discussing now is the balance of power between the legislative process and those roles, and how those roles of regulatory and administrative bodies are defined and discussed in legislation. Those who took exception to that during those debates made those points known, and I respected that. But what we're asking everyone here to respect is the balance of power that rests within those who represent the people in the state of Illinois, and that is the legislative bodies. I urge an aye vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All those in favor of the adoption of House Resolution 755 signify by saying yes. Those opposed say no. In the opinion chair, the ayes have it, and House Resolution 755 is adopted.